Massive failures. Massive failures. I'm not nuts and I'm not insane. I just needed a victory year to confirm that.
Welcome to the 353rd installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. John and Karen Stevens are raising corn and soybeans pretty much on the edge of where such row crops can be grown successfully in Minnesota. They have 750 crop and pasture acres in Pine County, which is north of Minnesota's Twin Cities. To give you an idea of how far north that is, there are times they've had to use tillage to fix damage black bears wreak on their fields. As John puts it, the flat landscape of the farm can be pretty unforgiving when the rain falls, fast turning into a surface so hard that water can barely penetrate. Over the years, farming in such a harsh environment has prompted Maple Grove Farm to rely on moldboard plowing and other forms of intense tillage to tame the soil. But during a recent field day sponsored by the Minnesota Soil Health Coalition, University of Minnesota Extension, and the State Department of Agriculture, among others, the Stevenses were able to show how soil health practices like no-till, cover cropping, and rotational grazing of beef cattle have made those acres a little less ornery and a lot more productive. In fact, the evening before the field day, a guy named Jay Fear confirmed that the Stevenses are on the right track when he walked one of their fields and was duly impressed with how its aggregate structure and overall biological health had improved. It turns out Jay had walked these same fields 7 years ago, so he had a handy frame of reference for comparison. And when Jay Fear takes a look at a farm's soil, people tend to listen to what he has to say. When Jay was with the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, he was instrumental in developing the Burleigh County Soil Health Team in North Dakota. That team, which consisted of farmers like Gabe Brown, government natural resource experts, and scientists, played a key role in sparking the current soil health revolution we're seeing in this country and beyond. Today, Jay travels widely as a soil health consultant and speaker. During the Stevens' Field Day, presentations focused on water infiltration and soil aggregate structure, as well as a pasture walk, confirmed what Jay had observed the evening before. John and Karen are bringing their soil back to life in a growing region that doesn't provide much margin of error. After the field day, I talked to John Stevens about what's changed during the past 7 years, the lessons learned from failures, and the excitement he and Karen are experiencing as they see the land respond to regenerative practices.
We got about 750 acres total between all the hay acres and the row crop acres. The cows with the herd, we got 33 cows plus the calves that go with them, and then the steers we hold back for finish for freezer beef to direct to consumer. So we got 60 acres roughly stay for the grazing for the herd, and then we got a couple small acres for the steers because we try to we are grass finish on the steers, and so they get a couple little 3-acre paddocks, and then we do have to supplement them a little bit in the summertime with some other baled up hays and silages and stuff, sorghums, and then the row crop acres, we're at about 550 acres, 500 to 550 we bounce around on the row crop side. And we try to be as regenerative as we can. This year with all the rain made that a little bit of a challenge. So, you pull your old tools out of the tool shed, and like this year, the row crop cultivator paid off because that soil was just so wet, so anaerobic. We've row crop cultivated, and I bet that did more for us than any of the fertilizers we did. So the whole point of regenerative is we're not trying to be the next Dave Hula or Randy Dowdy, and I don't live in that area. Nobody's making 500 bushel corn up here within this century, but I can still learn from them guys. And so to be more regenerative and save on spreading a lot of just high salt load fertilizers, we focus more on the point of influence, plant testing, what the 4 R's, the right time, the right placement, and the right growth stage and the right product. And so it's really paying off this year.
Some of the, and no-till, is that an important part of your farm?
Yeah, yep. We'll rotate no-till through. Our soil here is kind of a sandy loam with some clay in it, And years ago, one of the soil scientists from the U of M was asked about they were doing a no-till conference in southern Minnesota, and they were asked, what would you do in southern Pine County for no-till? And the scientist was like, oh, ick, just keep doing tillage. And so our soil can turn to concrete like really fast. Yeah. And so your first year of no-till, you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. The third year of no-till, you're like, God, this is stupid. And so it's a very challenge, but I think the cover crops and the cattle, so where we're standing, we have 5 30-acre pasture bays. Okay. And so every year now we're starting that rotation where one's always coming out for corn or soybeans, probably come out for corn because we graze alfalfa. And so one will come out and one is always going back in. And then depending on the year and the other rotations, we bounce that around a little bit. The no-till here works good because we can go in if we pull. So like right now we're staring at pasture one that just came out of grass, went to corn, and then we can either no-till grass back into the corn stumps, or we can put in a small grains with a forage underneath it. A nurse crop. That way we can try to maximize, we're making money per acre is our goal. And so, hey, if I put a wheat crop out there and it does okay, you don't even have to do great. If it just does okay, then right behind that wheat crop, we've got a forage. And I don't know about you guys, but I'll tell you what, you roll up alfalfa and some clover and grasses with some wheat straw in it, them beef cows, they'll fight you to the death to get to that bale. That's some good feed, So that works really good. So we're learning how to move the dirt less. I grew up on the moldboard, and I remember watching this soil blow away every time it wind and washed away every time. We used a tube right behind you as a ditch, and when I was a kid, every time we hit, when I was a kid, a 3 or 4 inch rain event was like once a year. But we had so much runoff, I could tube that ditch.
On an inner tube?
On an inner tube. And now, I used to mud bog right over here with the 3-wheeler all the time, and now we're driving around with a 4-wheeler of a similar size as the old 3-wheeler. We've never been stuck with, it's amazing.
And you think that's because your water infiltration is just that much better?
The water infiltration, our soil structure, and I'll tell you what, Jay Fuhrer today, he made my life. We pulled some samples, so he was here 7 years ago when we were really getting into this journey, and he's like, hey, I remember trying to get a shovel in back then, and now, like, I can drop a shovel in, and I got some soil that if you don't want it, I'll come get it.
Yeah.
And so now I can proudly say that, like, I say this tongue-in-cheek, like, not insulting, but the guys in Iowa and Minnesota with that 6% organic matter stuff that's full tillage, you can keep it because this stuff's working.
Well, and you're really on the edge of the corn soybean grow area here. You're in Pine County.
Yep.
And plus, you said that this soil can be kind of ornery, kind of unforgiving here.
Our margin of error. So like a lot of times on corn, we won't replant because by the time you get much after June 1st, you might as well switch to beans because you aren't replanting corn on June 1st. We don't have much room for error for that kind of stuff. 11 miles north of here was, when I grew up, was the cutoff for row crops for the most part. They grew some corn up there. Most of it was for silage, a little bit for high moisture corn, and a random load made it to the cities. Right. And beans, there wasn't a whole lot of beans up there, but they're coming in now, as the cattle have moved out. Now the guys got to row crop the land, and the hybrids have changed. But, yeah, historically speaking, we're 11 miles from the end of row crop production on eastern Minnesota.
Wow. Wow. So you really do have to... what like you said, you don't have much margin for error.
Yeah.
Jay was here 7 years ago. What do you feel like you've done differently in the past 7 years? Because he talked. I just did a podcast interview with Jay, and he's super impressed. It's not just him trying to make you feel good. He's impressed.
That was the best $20 I ever gave him.
Yeah, there you go. And so it's his anniversary, so he's in a good mood. So yeah, what have you feel like you've done in the past 7 years that's really changed things?
Massive failures. Massive failures. We tried a planting green experiment one time, except we went in with non-GMO beans. That was just a complete disaster. We tried a barley. There was a guy that wanted barley, and we're like, gosh, barley would be awesome. We could put that barley in and then cover crop behind it and get set up with a green manure for corn, put most of the farm into barley. And a few days after we seeded it, it was a complete just nightmare of weather. And by the time we realized that the crop wasn't worth a dang, you're already too late to put in beans. Yeah. So you're stuck with it. Crop insurance doesn't pay much on barley, and so we had a couple years there where we were complete upside down. I did have some successes. We had some absolutely magnificent successes with cover crops very early into corn, which blew my mind because you're always told that if corn has competition early, you're taking away yield. And here we are with this beautiful oats and buckwheat and ryegrass and hairy vetch and just this magnificent grass crop in our corn. And so you take your successes and your failures and you put them together, and the lesson you learn from each, where they meet in the middle, I'd like to think is where I'm getting my success. And now this year, we buckled down, and for most of my life I had an off-farm job where that came first. So the farm also came second. So then now this year, we quit, both my wife and I quit our off-farm jobs, came home to work with my dad in the repair business to help him move into retirement and for us to help finish buying the farm. And this year was the first year in a long time that I just farmed. When it came time to plant, I closed the door on the shop and I focused on that planter. And I'll tell you, when you drive out, you see that corn behind you and you see them beans up there, you tell me I'm lying if them ain't some of the most beautiful you've seen in the area. Yeah. So it's working, and I'm glad I finally got a year to be a farmer, not to prove to anybody, but just for myself. Like, I'm not nuts and I'm not insane. I just needed a victory year to confirm that. It's tough when you got, I have a lot of great neighbors, and like I said, it's a tough area, and I applaud all my neighbors for being successful. But there's a few guys in the coffee shops that are like, you're going to be bankrupt. You're the worst farmer in the area. You have the worst fields, blah, 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 blah. And now this year you're blowing them away because you're like, you know what? Just let me figure this out. Give me time and let me figure this out. And I got a lot of, for every one neighbor you have like that, I have a lot of tremendous neighbors here that are like, hey, that, the older guys, they're like, a lot of what you're doing is what I did as a kid. Keep it up, good luck. And there's a lot of neighbors who are like, when you get that figured out, you let us know. Yeah. Because in this tough climate of corn and beans, there ain't any profit margin.
Especially right now with the way prices are.
Yeah.
I wonder, is one thing that's changed in the last 7 years, was livestock such a key? It seems like it's become a key part of your operation here.
Yeah. We had a great marriage, and then we went back into cattle. Now she has a great marriage with her cattle. So we got rid of the dairy back in 2003. And you could see the ground just slowly, and everybody around here will say it. Like when they take over an old dairy farm, year after year, it gets tougher to maintain or improve yields because the soil just starts going backwards. And so with the integration of the cows back, that's their job. Their job, the meat is the byproduct. Their first job is to get this farm going. So like the food grade soybeans behind you over there, we had zero purchased P&K for that. I will never have to buy P&K from the co-op on this whole 150 acre section of the farm again, because every winter you put out more P&K in one winter with the hay through them cows than I could afford to buy ever.
Yeah.
I mean, you're literally, we did the math on that field there the other year, and it turned out to be, I think we had close to 300 pounds of potassium, actual potassium, got spread through the hay and applied to that field through hay and carbon, but think of the dollars in today's price. That field wouldn't even need cows for 10 years.
Right.
We just get some biology going, and I can use the hay for other fields because that one's set for the rest of my life.
So when did you bring the cows back?
2018.
Yeah.
Six years, Yep. So we bought 10 cows. Then like beef, you lose a third right away, so we lost 3 cows right away. We did buy really good genetics from a neighbor right across the road, and then we've held every heifer back since then. We've done a tiny bit of culling, but we've tried to grow the herd. So in them couple of years, we went from basically 7 to 33, and they are performing.
They look great. I went out there, and somebody said, some guy who knows what he's talking about said he gave him a body score of, I think, 7.5.
Yes.
And
That's a cattle judge.
yes, and that stuff and the paddocks looked great,
Yeah.
and they were really just good natured, and they didn't care that we were walking around out there. Just in general, you could tell there really some good husbandry there,
Yep.
and they're really having a nice impact.
Yeah.
Can you describe just in general, kind of in the bit, you kind of have this rotation then where you will graze cattle. It sounds like you'll put in some permanent pasture, the permanent paddocks, and then you're putting in the corn and the soybeans after. What's kind of your general, how many years cycle, or can you describe
Yeah.
a big
So
scale rotation that you have here?
The goal would be, in a perfect scenario, of 4 years of alfalfa grass. Then it's going to come out for 1 or 2 years for cash crops. Take advantage of what we've built up for fertilizer, and then right back into alfalfa grass. So we got 5 bays. So the goal hopefully would be one's always coming out, one's always going back in, and then one might be hay, might be cash crop. Feel it by the ear, because we still have our other fields that we can rotate alfalfa grass as a hay field through to rotate your other fields.
Okay.
So you just kind of play it by ear. But in a perfect scenario, if this was our only thing, 4 years, 2 years off, back to 4 years.
And so last night you were describing that Jake, you kind of took a walk out here and he was taking some soil samples.
Yeah.
And he kind of changed your mind a little bit on a practice that you like to do, which is moldboard plowing. Could you just tell that story? I think that's it's kind of shows that it's like, well, okay,
Yeah, so I had thought, because of the damage on some of these fields, and like this ditch here, I will take the moldboard and roll that ditch shut because we don't have water leaving the fields like we used to, so why have a ditch cutting a field in half? So I will moldboard that spot, but I thought behind the cows, let's moldboard this green manure down, and with all that hay being spread, like that can't be that bad of a negative. And then last night we walked that field of rye, and that was one of the fields that was going to get moldboarded because it's got some ruts in it, and the cattle the bears have dug holes up on the hill. Oh yeah. There's
how far north we are.
there's a lot of damage to that field and the cow traffic, and so it's just kind of a miserable field. And I thought, boy, I hate if I can't go 6 or 7 miles an hour on a hay field, So I thought, well, I'll moldboard that field and start over. And then we started digging around in there and seeing the soil, how much it's just improved in a couple years. And you're like, oh God, I can't moldboard this. Like we've came way too far.
Yeah.
So now we had to change our plans that, okay, instead of moldboarding next year, we're just going to have to no-till the wheat with an alfalfa grass nurse crop mix. And we're just going to have to dust it up with a finisher or just use prescription or zone tillage to hit them nasty spots and leave everything else.
Yeah.
And, yep, we got some necessary evil we have to do. But, yeah.
And then Jay can come back in 7 years and see how it
7
went.
more years. That would be awesome.
So how old are you?
I am 49, 48, 49. Somewhere in there.
So it sounds like, and you've been farming how long?
I was born on this farm.
Oh, yeah.
I was 6 years old in the field right over here. At 6 years old, we had a Farmall 350 that my dad and Grandpa bought brand new from Souser's Hardware in Pine City. And we still have Grandpa's H in the back shed. That was new in 47, and the 350 was in 56 or 58, somewhere there. And 6 years old, we had the old Harrow, so Dad would moldboard and then disc it a couple times. And then before the Brillion, you had that old 4-bar pipe Harrow. Yeah. And so he put me on the Farmall 350, and no fenders, no fenders, no seatbelt. Yep. Don't fall off, kid. Yeah. And put me in gear and smack me on the back and give her hell. And I've never looked back since. At 10 or 12 years old, he'd have to come out to the field to get me. You can come home now. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're having fun, or maybe you didn't have fun for a while, but now you're having fun.
Like anything, there was some tough years in there, and the biggest thing is I can complain about the challenges of my area, but it don't matter where you go. You could find challenges to your area. But it's just acknowledging them challenges and then figuring out what do I need to do to correct these issues that I'm having.
Yeah.
And so, got to stay positive.
By the way, the next Ear to the Ground episode will feature the interview I did with Jay Fear at the Stevens' farm. For more on building soil health profitably, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 353 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore at landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. And word of mouth is the best way to spread the news about our podcast. If you like what you hear, tell at least one person about LSP's Ear to the Ground. Thanks to Laura Morgendale, Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.